Welcome into another Inside Carolina analysis show. It's not really a reaction show, but it is somewhat of a reaction show. That's Jason Staples. I'm Tommy Ashley, sponsored by Johnny T-Shirt. And of course, Big Game USA. Check out what you need to get for the fall.
You think you know North Carolina? It's not just the Smoky Mountains and the Old Well. This is Kenan Stadium, where the Jordan Fly Elite game ball makes its debut and its homecoming. Born to fly, built for Carolina, snag your Carolina blue today.
We've been talking about this football for a while on this show, last couple months. It is your opportunity to own a piece of the game. If you can't get the shoulder pads on and the jersey on, you can get the ball. You can throw it around at your tailgate. You can throw it around in your backyard. I wish we had more than one, Jason, so I could act like I was passing to you and you could catch it and just carry it on you.
At my age, I'd drop that thing, even if we were pretending.
I'd probably knock something off your bookcase back there. But this is Big Game USA's gift to North Carolina fans. Go to the link at the end of the video, the link on the description. Get your Jordan Fly Elite football, the official game ball of the North Carolina Tar Heels. Let's get into this. This is, as you can see as the bottom, if you're watching on our YouTube channel, North Carolina's recent defensive haul from the portal, and we're going to focus on the trenches, and that's defensive line. We've heard ever since December started, and Bill Belichick was announced that they were going to build from the inside out. A lot of people had some consternation about losing guys to the portal and not getting defensive linemen in the portal. Well, in the past couple of weeks, they have secured a few. Lost Rodney Laura, lost Joel Starlings, who I think, Jason, you and I both liked as prospects to a certain degree. But they've added three, and we're going to talk about all of them right here. First one, if I can get his name on the screen, we're going to go with Joseph Mupoyi out of Penn State, defensive lineman, a big young man, committed to North Carolina on April 24th, 6'5", 230. Got some length. Jason, what have you seen from him? What does he bring to the table for the Tar Heels?
Well, he only had a couple snaps. 4 snaps as a true freshman. So I'm going off high school film and just basic stuff that I've seen on that. But there's a whole lot to like here. First of all, I want to highlight Penn State has recruited the edge position about as well as anybody in the country the last few years. I mean, who got picked as the first edge in the NFL draft this last year? This current draft, Abdul Carter. And they've been recruiting to that kind of mold for a few years. And Mupoyi is really, or Mupoyi, I think is how you say it. I'm still working on this. So I think his huddle says he goes by Vicky. I don't know what that's all about, but we'll find out. In any case, when you take a look at him in terms of the physical traits that show up, he's obviously raw when you're watching him on his high school tape. He's more raw than the average guy. But at 6'5", and then he's coming in allegedly, and based on that photo there, he had already put on enough weight to be at 260 as a freshman last year. When you watch him on those in high school and you watch what his capacity is, you're seeing a freak athlete. I mean, he's one of those guys, he's a basketball type player who has that length, really, really long arms. I mean, just ridiculously long arms, hard to get to his chest. And then he pairs that with just some really natural bend and agility, like what you would expect out of a guy who is a quality, like pushing on college level basketball player, just grew into another sport. I'll just say the movement skills are really good. The athletic profile is exactly what you'd want to see. He would have been, I think, probably the best edge prospect that they would have brought in the last 2 recruiting classes. You can make a case for that. So just bracketing that he's a transfer, if he was in his second year on campus, there'd be a lot of buzz about him, I think, about potentially fighting for a starting job this year based on the traits and the profile. So we'll see how long it takes for him to get there. We'll see how long it takes for it to click. And for some guys, it never fully does. We're going to see whether the motor is really going to run hot enough, whether he's going to be physical enough at this level to be an every down type guy. But in terms, again, of the profile, of the athleticism, of the capacity to become a plus pass rusher, you can absolutely see why Penn State wanted him out of high school and why Belichick and company would want him as a transfer. The tools are there. It may take a year. It may not. I mean, there's no guarantee. You're banking on upside with this guy, but the upside's really good, like NFL good.
Yeah, I feel like if you're recruited by Penn State and you're counted on by Penn State, you're, like you said, you're a good prospect. He certainly has the traits there. Moving on down the line, North Carolina added defensive lineman Isaiah Johnson from Arizona. Another guy, there was a lot of consternation with what they've lost on the defensive line side of the ball. Jason, what does Johnson bring to the table?
To me, he's important depth there, who brings good size and some punch on the interior. 6'1", 310 area, somewhere in there. Played 170 snaps as a redshirt freshman in 2024, 11 snaps the year before. And again, you see him on screen, and for those of you who are watching this on video, and he looks the part, right? You want that guy coming off the bus early on when you go on the road, right? He's one of those guys you want to walk off the bus. But at the same point, you could see, based on what he was as a redshirt freshman, I think he's still a little bit more of a depth piece at this stage of his career than he is a guy that's really someone you want to depend on as a starter just yet. I think there's some potential there. I think he's got, pretty long arms for 6'1". And this is actually something to watch for. At the coaching clinic, Belichick actually brought this up, that they explicitly look for guys who are long-waisted, who are low cut, as it were, who have shorter legs for their bodies than their height would suggest. So guys who just have long torsos. They want long torsos at almost every position. And the reason for that is that you get the benefit of the long arms and of the height without losing the agility that you have when you have a little bit shorter legs. So the shorter legs allow guys to be a little bit quicker. You don't have some of the problems of being a little bit too high cut, not being able to get low. So they want guys who can bend those knees, bend those hips, and be low while still having the advantage of the long arms of a taller guy. And I think he kind of fits that profile. I'm betting that he's, relatively speaking, taller when he sits down than when he's standing up. You know what I mean? So he's one of those guys. I do think, what I saw of him, and I mostly watched, he had his most snaps against BYU and Arizona State this last year, and those are the games that I focused on. And he struggled some in those games. I mean, he did not dominate. But he also, you could see the traits kind of pop at different points. And you go, okay, that's why they took him. That's a nice little punch there to knock that guy into the backfield a little bit and create a little bit of space. But he's still really a work in progress. Gets knocked off his spot too often, especially against combo blocks. Most of the time, from what I saw against those two teams, and those were probably the two best offensive lines that Arizona played this year as well. BYU and then Arizona State was a playoff team. He didn't really do a whole lot in terms of splash plays or anything where he's getting into the backfield there. More of a guy that I think really replaces a guy like Starling's, where he kind of, the potential to grow into more, I think, is there. I think you've got another big body that can eat up some snaps without hurting you, and somebody that you're hoping can grow into more with some good coaching and good weight training and all of that, and with some years left to play. So again, I like this take. I don't think anybody should expect Isaiah Johnson to come in and be a difference maker day one, but he is a guy that I think fits the profile of the kind of player that they want on the interior. He can play the 0 and the 1 technique, over the center, and not get just knocked around, and to be a pretty physical player. So there's promise there. I think he was an important get. Once you lost Laura and Starlings, I think he kind of more or less fills the spot of one of those guys, maybe with a little bit more, maybe more upside, but it's a little hard to tell at this stage. Certainly more experience than those guys bring in.
That is Penn State.
Isaiah Johnson.
Yeah, but no, Penn State, Arizona, and now we go to Florida. North Carolina brings in DeAndre Robinson from Florida. Jason, another guy that can fill some space, just sort of talk about what he brings. I'm going to drop a picture in the screen. The man certainly looks good getting off the bus
for North
Carolina. Tell us about Robinson.
Yeah, Robinson is a guy that got me a little bit excited watching him. And watching some of what he was able to do, especially late in the season. And you see him there actually after a fumble recovery against Florida State, where he was in the backfield when they got a strip sack and fought through and recovered that. Big time play. Listed at 6'3", 307. Another guy that I think fits the profile in terms of the little bit, I think, longer waist, longer arms, very long arms, looks to me on tape. And the bulk is already really good. I mean, you can see the bubble, as they like to call the butt in scouting circles. He's got the hip power sort of naturally there. He's got the engine to become a really powerful player. The sort of backside, the posterior chain that you're looking for these types of guys. He's got it. And, I know Belichick and Lombardi really pay attention to that stuff in terms of how they scout. This guy fits their profile. Watching him, this in so many ways, Robinson is just your typical Florida State, Miami, Georgia defensive lineman at a young stage that has, the potential to grow into a really good player. He's just the kind of player that those programs bring in, year out, historically. Just, you see, everybody who's listening to me, who's watched college football for a while, knows exactly what pictures came into their head when I'm saying 4-star defensive lineman, mostly like 3 technique type guy, who's playing for Miami, for Florida, for Florida State, for Georgia, for those programs. That's what this guy is. He would have been somebody that everybody would have been justifiably excited to get as a freshman. He's someone that Florida is very much not happy about losing. If you go and you talk to anybody around the Florida program, this one hurt. They were a little bit taken aback by losing this guy. He played a decent amount as a true freshman, played 162 snaps in 2024, and that was not a bad defensive line in 2024. They had some guys on the interior, and he earned his way in and rotated with those guys. Had 27 snaps against Florida State and actually graded out at 71%, 71.8% from Pro Football Focus. And again, take all that with a grain of salt, but what I saw a guy who in that game, and look, Florida State's offensive line was bad last year, but in that game, he was consistently getting some push when it was against the run, got some penetration. He did get walled off at times, but you're not going to win every one. And what you see with him is some splash potential. You see a guy that can get into the backfield, that has the long arms, pretty good natural hands. He's still got to figure out how to not expose his chest when he's trying to swim and some of those things. He's a raw guy, and with some coaching, I think could become a really good player. But he is an excellent athlete. There were some occasions where you watch him against Florida State. He also played 18 snaps against Texas. 16 snaps against LSU. You watch him in some of these, and on some of those plays that are going horizontal, that are going wide, you see him get loose and take off running, and you're like, oh, he can really move. That guy, and the other thing is the motor was there to actually continue to chase, and he doesn't look tired. Now, some of that's that he's not playing a ton of snaps, but he did show that he's going to pursue and that he has the capacity to stand up and do that. Now, some other things, he's still very much a work in progress. The motor to me was a bit hot and cold. There would be one snap where he would fire off the ball low. You'd see that posterior chain and the ability to bend, and he'd get right into somebody's chest, get his hands there, start winning that, and get penetration. And you're like, oh man, that looked really good. And then 2 plays later, he's standing up, peeking in the backfield, and that's not his job on that. This is not just a matter of like, oh, they changed this. No, it's just in one case, he's getting off the ball like he's supposed to, and doing what he's supposed to do and getting some penetration. And then a couple plays later, he stands up off the snap, gets neutralized, peeks in the backfield, and isn't really a factor. So, and then also there are times where you can see he loses power when he's moving horizontally a little bit. So, when he's moving forward, you can see the potential for the power, but he's just a puppy. He's big paws, running around a little bit where you're like, okay, that puppy's, if he can learn to bite when he gets older, he's going to be a fighter. He's going to be dangerous. This is a guy that if I were coaching defensive line, I would want to have on my roster, because I would believe that I could make this guy that I could take this puppy and make him into somebody fit for certain quarterbacks kennels some years back, right? This is a guy that I think really has a lot of potential and can be a good player. I think he's probably a starter year 1. I think he probably starts this next year, and I think he is the most talented interior defensive lineman on the roster probably the minute he walks on campus.
That is Deontay Robinson from Florida, the trifecta Jason has discussed. Mupoyi, Robinson, and Isaiah Johnson from Arizona. I've got a follow-up question for you, Jason, but I want to talk about JohnnyT-shirt.com. Sponsors of this podcast. Look, we talked about Big Game USA, the football there, but Johnny T-shirts your go-to on Franklin Street. If you're in town this weekend, next weekend, during the week, go see them at East Franklin Street. Go visit them. They're alumni-owned and operated. They've got all the swag you could possibly need if you're a North Carolina fan, and you get 10% off if you're an Inside Carolina premium subscriber. So Johnny T-shirt and Big Game USA. Jason, here's the $64,000 question. Given what North Carolina lost, and we've hashed and rehashed those names, what have they added in the portal, or we know what they've added in the portal, how does it measure up? It's tough because it's somewhat apples to oranges, because what you lost, there were some really experienced guys and non-experienced guys, and now most of the guys coming in are not really experienced, but they have the potential. So how do you weigh it all out? North Carolina's defensive line, specifically post-portal, inward, outward, post-portal roster for North Carolina right now.
Wow, that's a tough one. I think you're a little worse at edge, because I don't think there's any replacing Bo Atkinson at the level that he played last year and that you would expect him to play this next year. And there's a reason that he wound up at Ohio State. Mm-hmm. Now, with Vilbert and Mupoyi, you're replacing him with 2 guys from Penn State who are they're good players and a lot of potential there. But I do think you're losing a little bit there relative to kind of what you had. Maybe a little bit better in terms of depth, but I think again, if you had to have the difference maker, the guaranteed difference maker with that experience, you take him. I think on the interior, I think DeAndre Robinson, I think he makes them better. I think you look at, they lost Starlings, They lost Laura. They lost Nwabwisi Ezeala, sorry, um, who we really hadn't seen do a whole lot yet. And I think, like I said, Johnson sort of fits as a replacement for, any one of those guys, whether that's Laura or Starlings. I think he's kind of, I might take Starling's potential just a little bit over him, but it's not, we're not talking about orders of magnitude difference at this stage. We're talking about pretty comparable level players. But I think DeAndre Robinson is a different level of player on the interior than what they had on the roster this spring. And I think he adds a guy that can actually make some plays on the interior, and that you can ask to do some things that they didn't have other people to be able to do. So I think that's all told. Given that I think in general the weakness coming out of spring, the big weakness, and the thing that I would have tried to throw as much as possible at was defensive tackle, and you need to get a difference maker there if possible. I'd say you probably would rather have what you have now than what you had prior to the transfers out. But it's pretty close to 6 on the one hand and half dozen in the other, because you're sort of robbing the edge a little bit to pay the interior. But I think the interior, you got to build from the inside out. The interior matters a little bit more in that stage. And I think the possibility that with Vilbert, with Price Yates, with Melkart, with adding Mupoyi into that mix, you've got enough bodies to throw at the edge position at this point that you feel like you should be able to get decent production and at least be able to platoon for certain situations and things. So I think you feel okay there. And then again, I think with DeAndre Robinson, they've added a player who's actually legitimately, he's got more upside than anybody that they had on the interior coming into the 2025 season without him there. So I might just tip it just slightly to after these additions as an advantage.
Absolutely. And just so folks understand, we're talking about portal additions and subtractions. We're not talking about guys that are there, Tyler Thompson, Javon Harvey, those type guys that are already on the roster. We're talking about strictly just portal movement. Yep. And that's what the purpose of these shows are. We will come back next week and do an offensive line version of this same show. But Jason, unless you've got anything else, I'm going to get us out of here at under 25 minutes, which was the goal. And I think we've done a good job. I think there's a ton of information here for our Inside Carolina people. Anything left on these three guys?
Well, I mean,
certainly the name test, pulling, they're not coming from, D3 schools. They're coming from big time football schools. And I think, at least on its face, that looks good. And they still got to be able to play.
Yeah, that can go multiple directions though, because, as Nick Saban said at one point, when guys were transferring out of Alabama and then they didn't do well at their next place, he's like, well, there's a reason he's not at Alabama anymore.
Valid.
Right? So it's a little bit of a double-edged sword, because they're good enough to get recruited at these places, but why are they leaving? That's always the thing you have to ask. But this is where, again, what I'm looking at, and the thing to kind of hang your hat on with some of this is, how many of these guys have I said he fits their profile? Athletically and, body type, different things. You can see that they're recruiting to their prototype. They have a list of traits. They know what they want. They know what they want to look like. And they're recruiting guys from these places that look like that have traits that they think they can coach up to build into those spots. I think several of these guys are going to need to be coached up. But again, Mupoyi, Robinson especially, you're looking at the upside there is enormous if those guys take to coaching. So,
absolutely,
gives you a chance. And I guess the other thing that I would say is that with each of these guys, they're all guys with lots of eligibility left. They're young. And one of the things that occurred to me when I saw these takes is, they're really building toward 2026. They want to win in 2025. Don't get me wrong, but 2026 is really where they're building for, what they're building for.
Indeed. That's Jason Staples on North Carolina's defensive line portal haul recently. We've done the shows. If you want to know about other guys in the past, go check them out. They're on this Inside Carolina podcast feed. They're on the YouTube feeds for sure. You can find them all over the message boards. Jason, I appreciate you taking the time. We will be back next week to talk offensive line, like I mentioned earlier. If you have any questions that you want Jason to address, drop them in the thread on the show threads on the message board. Hit me up on Twitter, email it, whatever you need to do. We'll attack those questions because there's no off season at Inside Carolina. We're going to be covering it and talking about it until TCU. You can believe that. Jason, always appreciate it. Let me say Johnny T-shirt. Let me say Big Game USA. Let me say you're open. Catch the damn ball. Peace out.